Yeah, yeah. So because Vukosi for Africa, she's likely a good. She's one of the people who was driving a lot of the early days of AI development. Yeah. I'm spending a lot of the Masakali people are all going to be engineers. The retreat to plan for the next 5 to 10 years of African land. For 5 days in one place.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning.
I guess it makes sense for a retreat because we have to be disconnected just to think about, okay guys.
I expected it difficult to get people up tomorrow after tonight's party. But it seems already people have been enjoying themselves. Thank you very much. I'm afraid one bit of our transport is a little bit late, so we will have people joining us. But I think we must get started. We have two excellent keynote speakers. They've asked me not to introduce them, but they will introduce themselves. But I will just make some housekeeping announcements. There is a session tomorrow, an open session, where if you have a service, a tool, a technique for investigative journalists that you wish to showcase, there's a session where you can get 5 minutes or so, depending on how many people want it. I think it's at 1:40 on Wednesday. If you have something you would like to showcase, please talk to Isak over there. Please do so. There is another session tomorrow to showcase books. If you have written a book relevant to investigative journalism, broadly relevant, then it would be great if you came, showed, and talked about your book. Again, timing will depend on how many people are there, and there's only 2 or 3 at the moment, but I know there's a lot more books in this room. So it would be great if you came forward, and if you want to sell your book, as you've seen, you can talk to the bookseller and hopefully sell some books. Okay, this evening, after the Carlos Cardoso lecture, there will be buses to take us to Arena, which is close by, but you need transport to get there. Arena Publishers Venue is where we're going for this evening's event. Buses are leaving 15 minutes after the end of that lecture. I'm afraid we've got a very full evening. So please, after the Carlos Cardoso Memorial Lecture, please make your way to the buses quickly as possible. If you're taking your own car, that's fine. There's parking at Arena. It is in Parktown. And we'll see you there. Or if you take an Uber, or however you want to do it. If you want to stop by your hotel or something, take an Uber, we'll see you there. But we will be starting promptly there because we've got to get through the formalities so that we can get to party tonight. I think that's all my announcements. Anything further? Good. Thank you very much. Over to our speakers.
Okay, I guess about to start. All right, it's great to be here, coming back for another AIJC. We're good? Oh, no screen. Okay. Are we good? Okay. Okay, I'll restart. Yeah, I'll be close. Okay. Let's just having to handle this on the side. I'm Vukosi Marivate. I'm the chair of data science at the University of Pretoria, and I'll be doing this keynote with Athandiwe Saba, who's a great colleague, and we've been working together for a number of years, who's at Code for Africa, and actually also at the University of Pretoria with us for one of our projects. Just to actually, let me do this very quickly. The TLDR, given everything else that's going on, unfortunately on the west coast of the US at this current moment, which sometimes might feel it overshadows what's going on in the rest of the world, which we really should be thinking about, is we're never going back to an AI winter. We used to have these things of going between summer, having an AI summer, AI, everybody's talking about it. It's really putting in a lot of funding is going towards that, and then going to the autumn, and then going to a winter where money gets pulled out. We're not going back to that situation, and one of the biggest reasons just because the top organized companies in the world at the moment are very much AI driven. Right, so we might just keep on going from summer to spring, summer to spring, summer to spring. So the hope of this talk is just to get to a point where understanding where we are, likely what the next steps are, and how in journalism it actually can deal with these summers going on. Oh, okay. Okay, I have to speak slow. It's okay. Yeah, all right. Simply. No more winters. No more winters. So that's an important thing. So yeah, I've gone a couple of number of places. Started here actually at Vets, doing my undergrad in engineering. Before this when this stadium was actually a stadium, and it now it changed into this facility. And I'm at University of Pretoria now. I'm also a co-founder and now business development for Lelapa AI, which is an AI startup based here in Rosebank, and work also on grassroots AI organizations like the Deep Learning Indaba, Masakani. And at the university, we specifically work on AI and language on there. So we've got a number of staff members, students, team members who work on lots of AI having to do with African languages. And this is a very important thing for us. So, we can assume that everybody really knows what AI is outside the buzzword or the little tools that people play around with. But I think it's very important for us to set a common ground. So let's actually talk about AI and machine learning before we talk about large language models. So what is machine learning? This is a simplified example, but really gets you to understand the intuition. So it's a subset of artificial intelligence, right, that deals with machines learning patterns from data. So let's say I give you an example here. I give you two dots, one being red and the other one being blue on a plane. It's just on a flat surface. And then I ask you, can you predict if a dot that is colorless drops onto that plane, what color it's supposed to be? So what you do is that you have to learn a small system, and then this system will just tell you that. And the simplest thing to learn is a straight line that sits in between the two data points. Anything that falls on the left in the future, I will just predict that it's red. Anything that falls on the right of that line, I'll predict that it's blue, right, without having a color. And this is basically what we call a decision boundary. We do know that life is not that simple. It will be more complicated, and your data tends to look a little bit more complicated. And what tends to happen is that to now fit this new data, you need a new decision boundary that's more complicated, right? Instead of the simple y is equals to mx plus c, you now have something that looks like a quadratic function in math to fit that data. Now in the future, anything that is above that line, I will predict that it's blue. Anything that is below, I'll predict that it's red. And so I know it's oversimplified, but I'm just trying to get you the intuition of there must be input. I must learn some pattern from that input, and then I must then when I get new data, I then predict, given what I've learned from the past. You can then take the step, which is a huge leap, but it's okay, to where we are currently now, that for a lot of you, you have a phone, you take pictures of the phone, later on you search for the word tree, and then it shows you all the pictures of trees on your phone. What has happened? We've had models that are built taking millions and millions of pictures that are already annotated or they've tagged them with what's in the picture, and they can then identify items in the same way that you've given them all these examples. The machine learns that pattern, and then it can predict in the future. So you can see that that's a useful kind of space. And why do we do this? Without machine learning, a programmer would have to sit there, describe in that picture of the cat or the dog, describe in code what a dog looks like, what a cat looks like. It has an ear. Here's how an ear would look like. Here's how it would shape pixels, all those things. With machine learning, you would just give it lots and lots of pictures of cats, lots and lots of pictures of dogs, and then the machine learns that instead of the coder having to describe that on there. And this has been a major, major change in some ways, because what has been, when I've thought of that we've gone between the summers and the winters, is there was something that was missing there in pushing us forward. And a lot of it has been the intersection of compute, so how powerful computers are, and data, how much data you actually have. And really, for many people, they believe actually the data is the biggest challenge, right? The compute has caught up, and now the data is the biggest challenge. So the reason we're going through a generative AI revolution right now, this thing of things that generate images or generate text, is that now the data part is starting to also stream and be used on there. But we should learn from this past that we've gone through these winters as well on there. So the old things will become new again, and we need to then reason about them. So now onto my next part here is then thinking about these large language models. So ChatGPT is just one example of a large language model, but there's many, many of these kind of things. So remember we said we have to do this prediction, an input and an output. And I said we're going to hand wave a lot of things just so that we can understand. So one of the things you have to build in a language model is you have to build a machine learning tool that can take as input a sentence. You remove a word from that sentence, and instead of putting it as an input, you put it at the outside as an output. So you now teach the machine to basically fill in the missing word. What is this in layman's term? Autocomplete. You've been using it on your phone, on your email for a long time. Those things are enabled by language models, right? That you can just start typing, and then it predicts what the word that's supposed to be next is supposed to be on there. But now what we've been able to do is build bigger and bigger of these models, and in some ways they're they use this thing where all you need to do is take like Wikipedia, take lots and lots of sentences, randomly remove words, and then train the model to just keep on predicting the word that's been removed, right? And by doing that, you've got this large language model that encapsulates some parts of the regularity of some language, right? And then once you've got that and you've trained this in English, in Setswana, in French or whatever, you can take that and then fine tune it. We'll talk about for a final application. So not just predicting the next word. So this is where the thing of pre-training comes in. I don't know. Oh, I did not touch anything. Pre-training comes in because to train these models, you can just take what comes from the internet. What some companies are doing are scraping all of the internet, training these models first, and then from there fine-tune it on a final task. So one could be spam detection, and then being able to identify that spam. But the thing that's interesting for us and how we get to things that look like ChatGPT or Bard or whatever is this question answering. So after you've trained it to predict the next word thing, it's encapsulated some knowledge in there, the next one to give it is give it lots and lots of examples of questions and answers. So for example, here from Stanford, there's this question answering data set where it's just questions and answers, and then now you continue training the model to be able to take in as input a question and then try to generate the answer. And by doing that, it should learn a way of saying, even if a question I haven't seen before comes in, I kind of can look at almost like my knowledge base and find a way to string along something that looks like an answer. Right, so that's a Squad. I think Squad is like 100,000 questions. There's Trivia QA with lots of trivia for the University of Washington. And then here's another one that's more recent, that's Alpaca. But many more of these things are being created right now. So now you can do question answering, right? So we're keeping to the same thing, input, output on there. Now we have to deal with the issue of, I'm going to do question and answering, but the answers might not be correct in the way that I like. And some of the ways that, for example, my understanding, especially with journalism, is understanding either biases or stance or how somebody writes something or the sentiment or whatever. And there's also safety, that you don't want to get things that are generated that actually might be harmful. So the big thing that happened last year, and what we've done now is probably went from the 90s of AI to the 2000s of AI, to the 2017, that's where the BERT paper, so the thing of doing this, predicting the next word in at scale became in, and now we're last year around June. So last year around June, this Instruct GPT paper comes out, and it says you can deal with some of these things or trying to align the values of the humans with the machine. So getting the machine to align with the humans. So what you do now is that you do question answering, but now there's a human evaluator who sees the response of the machine and then gives it another good or bad job. That this is just the next intuition here. And if you do this enough, you then align it to whoever has been asked to be the one who does this, this filtering, right? It creates more questions, right? If you remember the early days of ChatGPT in November, December last year, there was a lot of papers written about how ChatGPT is either very right-leaning or very left-leaning, right? Because you do have this instruction a part that happens where a human has to sit there, and then OpenAI had to be doing this thing of saying, okay, we're releasing another update, where now you do have to ask yourself, how is it that we're giving one company the power to choose where we stand, right, with kind of thing? But that's what's going on. There's a lot of now this instructional alignment work that happens to then align these systems to hopefully mimic the way a human would. But then the bias that we have as humans is the same bias that the machines will have. Like, so there's this part of saying machines don't have bias. That's untrue. The data that we create is going to be biased. The people who are going to sit and make choices about the alignment are going to be biased. And this will actually creep in on here. And it's very important at this point to know that it wasn't just ChatGPT. I showed you Instruct GPT, which was like in GPT 3.5 that came out before ChatGPT came out in November, and there were many, many more of these models before, and there have been many, many more models after, and they come from lots of different organizations. The thing that happened with ChatGPT is just that it became a customer-facing or a consumer-facing technology, as opposed to it's only for the developers who are building things in the background. And now it's out there. People are trying to use it for many, many, many different kind of things on there. So there I'm just showing lots of different models, their sizes. Palm is like from Google, OPT from and NLLB come from Meta or Facebook. I think there's Jurassic and NLG from Microsoft. So all of these are different companies that had been working on this on there. And there's a whole like almost like a family tree of where we go around 2017 and where we are right now. We're on the top right, where GPT-4s, all those things, and you can see how many, many more of these, and a lot of them are invisible to you. You've just been using them, whether you're in Gmail and doing autocomplete, right, where you're on other app and then it's doing stuff. They've been using these kind of models inside them. To finish off in the last minute for this section before Athandiwe comes on, is then to understand this thing. I've said we scrape the internet, we train this model, but this model is actually smaller than the internet in size. So what happens is that you need to do compression. You take all of the content that is out there, you have to compress it into this model. It's still big, let's say multi-terabytes and petabytes, but it's still not the size of the internet. And the intuition here to have was a very nice article here from the New Yorker, is that it's a blurry JPEG. You remember, if you took an image and you had to reduce the size, it would become blurry. That's what's happening. There's loss that is happening. And that's why when it comes to some things, you can ask these systems questions, and then they come back with very weird answers, or they miss facts, or they can't reason correctly. Parts of that is because of this compression that is going on, right? I'm not going to show an example, but in the past, you could ask the ChatGPT, what weighs more, 1 kg of bricks or 2 kgs of feathers? This would be simple, they weigh the same. This would be simple that they won't weigh the same because you've said 1 and 2. But then because online, there's this reoccurring logical game of 1 kg of feathers and 1 kg of bricks, it will keep on saying they actually weigh the same because it ignores the numbers. Right? They've changed it now. It's fixed. But these are some of the issues that were coming in here. And it made sense if you start thinking about this issue of compression that is going on inside these models. The other one is how it deals with our languages. So this is some work at a startup called Lelapa on just looking and saying, feed ChatGPT, count from 1 to 10 in isiZulu. And then it would say Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, Q5, which is obviously not correct, right? It's adding kind of on there. Here as a translation, the sentence there, Kuyabiza kugibela ibanoi, it's expensive to go on an aeroplane, but then you can see what the translation is. It says, he insults me. Calling him a coward. Right, so these parts now where there's really they don't work well because there's not that much data, and they're also not fine-tuning for these languages. They're not working to actively say, let's improve it for these languages, but then we know people are using them to do this. Right, kind of on there, I'll skip on there. And this then comes down to who gets counted when it comes to these systems. Who are the people that they're being designed for? And as Africans, we have to then start thinking very actively about this, because then we need to deal, especially with all these corners we don't see that look like they're in the dark. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Oh, don't worry, guys, he's going to be back. So I'm going to be talking about investigative journalism in the space of and the age of AI, and how LLMs kind of fit into it. Okay, I just need to get this cursor thing right. So I'm Athandiwe Saba. I am the managing editor of iLab at Code for Africa. I work with an amazing team of forensic analysts and investigators who look into coordinated online behavior, misinformation, and we use a lot of these tools that are based on a lot of what Vukosi has just spoken about. Code for Africa, for those who don't know at this point, we're quite an African kind of focused organization. We are doing some of the work that I've just spoken about in about 26 different African countries. You can see some of the partners that we work with in our consortium. And we conduct, as I've mentioned, investigative forensic research and into coordinated networks and information manipulation. We also have a fact-checking side that looks into a lot of disinformation, but we also do training and help newsrooms and journalists to do their work better. These are some of the partners that we work with: Global Investigative Journalism Networks, the International Fact-Checking Network as well, because we do have a fact-checking side as well, University of Oxford, Reuters Institute. These are just some of the organizations we work on the different aspects of our organization. So, jumping right into the role of LLMs, because we've got other stuff we want to talk about at the end, so I'm going to try and get through this as quickly as I can. So the role of LLMs in the digital age is to assist us with the volume of data. And for instance, if you're looking at actual investigative journalism, there's so much data that is out there. This is where LLMs come into play. With data increasingly stored in extraordinary volumes, investigative journalists can use extraordinary analysis techniques to make sense of these enormous amounts of data. Some of the stuff that Vukosi was talking about in terms of identifying trends, that's one aspect that LLMs can play into. And this extends beyond just simply data analysis. And I come from a data journalism background where we would use Excel to analyze some of the data. LLMs extend far beyond that, and far beyond also just simple report generating. These models can also identify patterns and trends in the data, providing journalists with quite valuable insights that can guide them and their investigations as well. For example, an LLM could analyze a large data set of social media posts to identify common themes or topics of discussion at that particular time. This could provide investigative journalists with a much better understanding of public sentiment and how the public understands certain information that's being shared. LLMs can also assist in predicting future trends. LLMs can be used to predict future trends based on historic data. This predictive capability can be incredibly valuable to journalists, as it can help investigators anticipate what future developments there might be. And also LLMs can assist us in automating a lot of the routine tasks that we do in our newsrooms to assist us to focus much more on the stuff that machines can't do, like talking to people. So my part is to assist the journalists in thinking about the journalism side and how we can connect these new technologies to some of the stories that we do. We've seen a lot of big stories that have broken internationally, and a lot of these stories have used some of these new technologies. We've seen a lot of the AIJC investigations, we've seen Panama Papers, the Luanda leaks. We've also been able to see something quite interesting quite recently with what's been happening with the Israel-Palestine conflict, where big organizations like the CNNs are actually getting these teams to fact check. A lot of that stuff is assisted by AI. Newsrooms in the global north, particularly those involved in major investigations like the Panama Papers, have demonstrated sophisticated and powerful use of these tools that we are talking about today. They leverage advanced technologies for data analysis, investigative journalism, and a collaborative reporting. These newsrooms often employ cutting-edge software and databases to sift through large amounts of information. Therefore, they are able to uncover complex financial networks, exposing corruption on a global scale. The successful outcomes of such investigations highlight the effectiveness of these particular tools. Now, how do we harness AI in an African context, harnessing AI for groundbreaking investigations? How would we use this in some of our investigations? So AI technologies empower African newsrooms to conduct groundbreaking investigations by providing advanced tools for data analysis and uncovering hidden patterns and revealing critical insights. Some of the things that AI can assist African newsrooms, and I'm specifically focusing on African newsrooms because we have seen the financial constraints that a lot of the newsrooms have had to go through in the past couple of years. Cost-effective research, it allows us to do that. AI-driven processes, they enable cost-effective research, allowing newsrooms to allocate resources efficiently and focus on in-depth investigative journalism without the financial constraints. Can you imagine the thousands of documents, for instance, the Panama Papers had or the Luanda leaks had, and you are expecting journalists to come into a room and sift through those? That would be near impossible, never mind the cost implications of that. But now these tools are allowing us to do so much more with the little that we have in our newsrooms. These tools also enhance information processing. The tools that we can use handle vast amounts of information, facilitating quite comprehensive investigations that delve deep into complex issues, corruption, disinformation, societal issues, and challenges as well. These tools also help us in combating misinformation. It has the ability to discern patterns, and this helps us identify counter disinformation, ensuring investigative reports are based on accurate and verifiable data. It also helps with the language barrier, actually, because once you're able to find something that's written, a lot of the work that we do is based in the Sahel region as well, and sometimes a lot of the posts that we have to pick up are in French and in other languages as well. I'm not a French speaking, most of my team members aren't French speaking, but some of these tools assist us in understanding the patterns and the language and are able to classify some of this information that we find. What you're seeing currently on the screen are some of the tools that in my team, the team that I work with, the iLab team, actually uses, and the other newsrooms that we are able to train in our sessions. Connected Africa, huge database of information there that explores the links between politics, power, and money across Africa. You can input a particular organization or a person that you're looking into, or a politician. Multigo, Media Cloud, these are just some of the tools that we use. And to get a little bit of a gist of some of these tools, you can go up there to Civic Signal. We will share this presentation, Civic Signal, and you can actually see how we use some of these tools. So I want to go into a couple of examples just to show how the stories that have come up from using some of these tools. Possibly some of you guys went to some of the presentations yesterday that my team was working on, and they spoke about Wagner and what's happening in the Sahel region. One of the stories that we have been able to put together was Afrique Media TV. Is this the Kremlin's new African mouthpiece? This story is important because it focuses on external influences and what they can do in the African context if they are allowed to continue. So Wagner and Afrique Media TV have been able to work quite closely together, and we have been able to identify that they are engaging Wagner and the former head of Wagner, Prigozhin, and Afrique Media TV there's been several exclusive, as they said, exclusive interviews between them. The media outlets, the Afrique Media TV, strategic dissemination of pro-Wagner propaganda videos across various social media platforms indicates quite a deliberate effort to extend the reach of their narratives. And if you know a little bit about Afrique Media TV, they are online, they have a website, they are on different social media platforms, they have quite a vast reach. We were able to connect the dots using some of the tools that I had mentioned, Multigo, to show that Afrique Media is getting a lot more coverage, is getting a lot more exclusive coverage from Wagner and Prigozhin than any other media house across Africa. And we needed to try and figure out why that was. Because Wagner has also been implicated in a report a little while ago about being able to involving themselves in certain countries' elections, and South Africa included as well. This particular influence has the potential to shape the public opinion and impact public outcomes as well in different African countries. This is a story from Africa Uncensored. I hope some of you guys were in the conversation yesterday. Africa Uncensored talking about some of their work. This is part of a series called Indebted, which was looking at Kenya's journey to the debt crisis. This story is quite important because it sheds light on the intricate dynamics leading to Kenya's debt crisis, exploring the impact of political alliances, questionable project funding, and financial mismanagement. I think in a lot of countries we've seen some of very similar examples. The investigation exposed the corruption, the dodgy deals, government's fiscal ineptitude, prompting quite a big public awareness and emphasizing the need for responsible governance. In working with Africa Uncensored on this particular series, I think they were working with the iLab team, and they were using Connected Africa to review some of the documents that were used by to review some of the documents that they had found, especially the contracts around a big dam that was being constructed at that time. Another example is IPOB, Diaspora, the particular network. Now, for those who don't know what IPOB is, it's the Indigenous People of Africa. However, it has been designated as a terrorist organization by the Nigerian government. This organization has been noted for spreading quite vast amounts of disinformation and hate speech, especially through social media. And how are you able to track that without some of these tools? This group has quite a large propaganda machine, which is spanning quite vastly across the diaspora, playing a significant role in disseminating its controversial campaign. The group has been involved in attacks on civilians, security personnel, and politicians, earning it as the third deadliest terror organization in Nigeria based on the 2022 Global Terrorism Index. And what we wanted to understand better is who was funding this particular group. And we found that a lot of the officials or members of IPOB were spread across the world as well. And some of the funding and the head of IPOB as well was based in the UK and other people across the world. And we were able to track a lot of this information using AI tools. My last example here is another investigation that was done by the iLab team and looking at Ghana itself. Ghana, and there was a particular protest just after the junta government took over in Niger. There was a pro-Russian protest in Ghana and pro-junta as well. However, this particular protest was coordinated and assisted in the coordination of it by Semyon Byukov. I think some of you might know him, a pro-Russian podcaster and a YouTuber who's based in Australia. And he emerged as quite a central figure in orchestrating the protest itself. His involvement goes beyond just advocating for marching and protesting. He went in and provided the Russian flags. He funded the production of the Wagner Group t-shirts that were worn during the march, and he actively encouraged similar protests across West Africa. He even came out to say he would put up the money for anyone who was arrested or the actual organizers who were arrested during this particular march. So getting started in thinking about how we use AI and LLMs and all of this, I know as a data journalist, having spoken quite a bit about data journalism at this conference for several years, it always feels quite daunting when we have to think about all of these technical aspects. And none of us, and I figured actually when I was working on the data journalism side, none of us actually have to be coders. We just need to be interested and have an actual problem in our newsroom. There's so many tools that are currently out there, but what we're not thinking about is what do we need? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? And is there a tool out there, is there a technology out there that can make our jobs simpler and for us to be able to go through so much data and analyze it and make sense of it? Newsrooms worldwide, especially in the global south, face long-standing challenges, as I had mentioned, financial constraints, political interference, and low literacy levels at some points as well. A technological gap exists, making it harder for news organizations in less prosperous economies to acquire some of these resources, provide the training to some of the journalists in their newsrooms, access information and the data itself, purchase the technologies. And I think at this point, I'm going to hand over to Vukosi, because at the end, what I do want to do is talk about how we all together can actually start making strides in this AI world.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, so we're going to go now to the thing I'm really passionate about, and that's the development of African languages. And one of the blocks that's very, very important is actually journalism, and from the perspective of telling the stories of African people in their languages, right? And there are opportunities there for us who work in the AI space to learn, and then also to contribute back from what's going on within there. So I'll go through this through a couple of examples. Okay, everything through a few examples, hopefully. So as I said, remember at the beginning I said there was compute and data, and I think data is more important. One of the challenges that we have as researchers and practitioners in this space in building these models is getting access to African language content, whether it's speech, text, whatever. On there. So we'll talk about text. This is a project we worked on at the beginning of the year with a couple of people in the university lab, and we were trying to identify how we can create more more models for South African languages, but you have to get the data. One of the challenges is that the data is sometimes hidden or behind, literal walls, even though they're virtual. So what we wanted to do is you want to liberate and prepare the textual multilingual data, extract sentence pairs. There's very good tools now to actually automatically align different documents that you know are having the same content, aligning sentences automatically, automate as much of the process, benchmark, and then release this data. So let me talk a little bit about creating the data. So one, South Africa, when Parliament sits, there's a covenant statement that comes out at the end. And this covenant statement, normally within a week or two, is translated from English into the rest of the South African languages. South Africa has 12 official languages, 11 also being written, and then the 12th is South African Sign Language, right, on there. So can we take all the written text and then actually automatically extract it, align it, put it, and get it ready for people to be able to click and download? right? Not necessarily having to go every page by page, but you just want people to download a CSV or a JSON file or whatever on there. For machines, this is very important to automate a lot of processes. So we did that. We have a scraper. I think it runs every Friday, puts this together, and you can go and you can find it, and you can download all the cabinet statements, and they are completely tagged and everything like that. And that data set is released. As I said, basically every Friday if there's a new statement, it automatically expands. The other one is Vukosi. Vukosi is a South African newspaper from the government. It's released in 2 editions a month. If there's 20 or 30 English articles, which are the main, I think, again, it's not me, I haven't, it'll come back. If there's 20 or 30 English news articles, only about 2 or 3 of them get translated to the rest of the South African languages. So that's almost like a 10% throughput, right? And it's saying that South Africans only, like, if you're not really comfortable reading or you can't read in English, you only see 10% of what is happening in terms of civic education, right? And this is a huge issue. So we went to the government asking for access to instead of the PDF copy. PDF is not good for machine processing. It's great for us to see because we can typeset and all those things, but it's very bad. We tried to get access and the government office said no. They could not give us the direct translations. There's a mix of reasons that really, for me, don't pass any muster. They're not really correct, but we will deal with that later. So what we did is that lab members for last year, some we were able to hire, some volunteered, and worked on actually extracting, like painfully, from the PDFs, extracting the news stories, and then tagging them, and then aligning them, right? So then it becomes a TXT file. Every news story just becomes a TXT file that has the title of the story, who wrote it, and then the rest of the text. That becomes available. We know which edition kind of it is. And one of the things I said you could do, for example, is you can align. So now you can have isiNdebele and Venda, 19,000 sentences that are aligned. It's the same sentence just in isiNdebele and in Tshivenda, right? And this is transformative because the more you make these available, the better it is to train machine-driven translation systems. Kind of on there, and that's one of the things that we did. Here we use English as a pivot language just to compare against other models, but we're currently working on building translation models for all 55 directions of South African languages, right? Because now we've got this data, we're increasing it, we're making it more and more, you're now going to have these new directions of translations that weren't there before. And they're machine driven, so you can put in something in isiNdebele, and then it will get translated into Xitsonga. Right, and those are the things that we want to make sure that these tools are available to people. They might not be completely accurate. Here's a piece of Seswati from the SABC Seswati News. And then if you use our model, the Seswati model is available for Seswati to English, and then it translates it there. It will have some errors, but you can get the gist of what is actually going on. Right, and we release these kind of openly on there. Now, I talked earlier that you have to build these precursors, these language models, the ones that do autocomplete kind of thing, before you start doing the other work of doing alignment or question answering. So here is a story of what we did for 3 years building up a Setswana language model. So this is a project that started in 2020, actually just before COVID hit, in terms of in South Africa. And what we did here, which is interesting, English data for ChatGPT Bard is likely in the petabytes that is used to train these models. For Setswana, we were able, over 3 years of work, to gather 25 megabytes of Setswana. All right, 25 megabytes of Setswana, and you can see all where it comes from on the side there. Lots of different places. Some of it is Vukosi, which we were able to create, basic education, all those things. The other thing there, so that's about 4.5 million words. They're not unique, just how many words were in the thing. Then there's a data set called JW300, which was created by the Natural Language Processing Community, which is consists of aligned content that comes from Jehovah's Witnesses. In 2021, if I remember correctly, the Jehovah's Witnesses then put out a cease and desist that people should stop publishing that data set. For many, many African languages, this data set was likely the largest amount of data for that language because the Jehovah's Witnesses are very prolific translators. They translate a lot of their content into many, many, many languages across the world. So just in comparison, JW300 was 4 times as big as the amount of data we had to find, on there. Because we started in 2020, we had it. And JW300 is 20 million tokens or words. And if you put it together, JW300 plus Puo data, you get to 25 million. Right? But I want to show you that even though it's biased, now it'll be religious, it'll be whatever, but for many, many languages, this is probably one of the largest corpora that they have for their language, or for some, might be the only one. And what the Jehovah's Witnesses organization did, and it has huge implications for language development. All right, on there. So we trained the Roberta model, and we trained it, in this case, it was 3 days for Puerberta, just using the data we got, and then another 3 days for Puerberta plus JW300. And what can you do with this stuff now? One, you can train things like entity recognition. You can go through sentences and be able to identify that Setswana, where there's a mention of a location, where there's a date, where there's a person. If this one, the person is actually wrong. But just imagine having lots and lots of Setswana text, lots of documents, lots of news articles, and being able to now automatically go through all of them, add all of this metadata, and then creating a new search interface for users that can then go through all this information. So you're basically taking something that will look like unstructured data and put it into a structure that is useful. You can, in this one, our model, don't know, then this one is a parts of speech, more if you're trying to extract parts of speech from the documents. And the other thing that we did, we took Daily News. Daily News is the Botswana news service, and they then also have a Setswana version of Daily News. We took 5,000 articles from there, and what we did is then we categorized them using the IPTC news codes, right? So news categorization, high-level ones, and now took every article, got some people to work and actually tag each of them. And then what you can do with that is now we can train a machine learning model that can predict the categories of each of the news articles in Setswana natively, right? And we got to about 65% accuracy, and then you can see there's a piece of text in Setswana at the top, and then it tags it and tells you that it's 75% chance that it has to do with crime and law, which is true, because it's talking about, I think, people going to court over there. I know I moved away from the mic. So these are tools that now become available on here. I'll try to speed up in this last bit. Then this was just from what our lab is doing, and we're still expanding into other languages. But there's some work across the African continent, especially by Masakane and lots of other networks, to build more and more tools here. One is driven through the Lacuna Fund that actually provides funding for people to create lots of data sets for AI on there, and we've given a lot of money towards language. So one corpus in this area is what we call, I see what I'm doing. The Ken corpus, which consists of speech, text, question answers, all those things for languages like Kiswahili, Luyo, all those are being made available for people then to try and then use. And it's enabled by community coming together and saying, let's create these resources for these languages. There's Masaka News, which comes from the Masakane research organization, which you can see how many languages, that's news content in all of those languages, and now they've gone on and tagged it and then built new machine learning models that if you have content in that language, it will automatically now categorize it for you within there, and then there's some performance of there. At Lelapa, which I said is our startup here, we're building tools, especially for now in speech. So if you need to be able to transcribe a local language, like in African languages, we're building tools in that area that you can upload MP3s and then get the transcript of, and for now, I think we're just early access for isiZulu, for Sesotho, for Afrikaans, for South African English, but our ambition is to cover as many African languages in the next 2 or 3 years as possible within these and being state of the art. So you can sign up at the moment for early access to our tools at Lelapa AI on that part. So just to stop and then I think Athandiwe thing is, look here, AI models have always been there with us. There's still much to do and we need to experiment. It's not just something to just say we fear and then we stop from engaging, but there's opportunities there. But we need to shape it, and especially as Africans. We need to shape what is it that we want these kind of models to really have, how do they match up to our values, and what do we expect as we transition? We know there's going to be a transition given technology, but what is it that we want? It cannot be something that happens to us. right? We need to really think about this in a different way. Athandiwe, I'll give it to Athandiwe now because she'll push also for this collaborative thing. And we need more money coming actually in terms of R&D in this space, especially from the private sector.
Definitely, definitely. And I think I just want to reiterate the part of collaboration and the importance of collaboration. Can you imagine, as an investigative journalist, being able to work with an AI expert, a data expert, a data technologist, and the kind of journalism that we will be able to create and put out there, holding those in power accountable. There's so many different projects that Vukosi and I have already worked on. I'm a journalist, he's a data expert in a university, but through that collaboration, it means that we're able here today to stand here and actually explain the broader world of AI and see what kind of stories that we can put out there. Can you imagine trying to find, what was one of our projects, on the court records, where we were trying to figure out what biases there might be in court records. As a journalist, I would never be able to do that by myself, but working with the team, the data experts, the AI experts, they are able to work with me and structure a lot of this data to answer such important questions that we have and society has as well. We have maybe 5 minutes for questions. 5 to 10 minutes of questions. I'd love to hear from you guys. 15 minutes. Awesome. We have 15 minutes of questions. Let's open it up.
Yeah. One thing. So unfortunately, I have been okay with calling myself that now. I'm an AI politician. So I have to, after this, I'll be here until 10:30, but I have to rush to Pretoria to sort out something with government. But Kathleen, if you can raise your hand, is here from our lab at the university, and also Masakane. So if you need to talk, she's here for the day. She's right sitting there in the middle. For us, thanks to all the people we work with in different spaces and collaborate. And yeah, I'll just leave this here as the Q&A comes along. At the bottom there, you can still sign up for Vula Vula, which is the tool from Lelapa. And if you need to get in contact, that's all. Yeah. It's like coffee after that. Isn't coffee? So that's what I think.
Thank you so much. I'm Guy Berger. I think what I also picked up in your presentation, Vukosi, is that this is not just a technical question. Because, for example, you couldn't get the data out of government. When you came to looking at, you showed us the screen of data on Setswana, Facebook is blank. These are policy questions. Unless journalists are aware of these policy questions and can push them to have open data, we're going to be handicapped. The second thing is, I think we need to be quite cautious about thinking that these are just tools that we just use. Because these are two-sided swords. And so we have learnt in the past years, when we search Google, Google is searching us. That when we are talking to our friends on Facebook, actually we're talking to a machine learning system with algorithms that keeps us engaged and then skews the content accordingly. So we have to think with these tools, who controls them, who's benefiting from them. At the end of the day, are we producing data by using these tools that will lead to AI apps being the source, the destination for people to get their news? Whereas we think we are just doing it. So it's not just a question of individual journalists using tools. These tools are using us as well. And we have to think what's the longer term consequences. And therefore, I really request investigative journalists, keep an eye on this big picture as well, because it's a data policy question, it's a governance question. It's about the geopolitics. Can you imagine that you're using these tools and they end up being controlled not by Sam Altman, by Elon Musk? I mean, how much worse can that be? So please don't only think of the instrumentalist. We have to make sure we are not instrumentalized only by these tools. Thank you.
Definitely. I definitely agree with that. The mic, where was the next question? Just as I address the comment as well. And I think halfway through the presentation, I'd mentioned that we need to think about what we need as newsrooms, as a society. What do we need? And how do we, and I think what Vukosi is talking about as well, what kind of AI society do we create around us so that these tools are not necessarily just using us, because we all understand how the data works and algorithms work. I hope we all understand how algorithms work and how data works. But it's about us. What do we need? Instead of constantly falling into the trap of somebody else building tools, and then we say, yes, we're going to use that one, we're going to use that one, we're going to use that one. And as investigative journalists, I think we need to think much broadly about and also report on how these tools are being built. What are these tools doing in terms of privacy as well? Because governments are also going to be using a lot of these tools to monitor, to track, to listen, all of that kind of stuff. We need to be reporting about it as well and seeing the kind of society that we want to build and use these tools within.
A quick one, just to give some heuristics. Likely, like I do know we've interacted, and Kathleen can tell you more about even some of the things we've been trying to do in Kenya with newsrooms, with media houses on availing, especially local language data. For us, there's a bit of, yes, fair use parts that come in, but we would like to get into conversations where we have permissive licenses. Yes, you can block specific types of actors, but for a lot of researchers in African languages, having permissive licenses that allow us to keep on doing this research, creating tools, we release our models open source at the university. So you can use that model, you can download it, use it yourself without us being on there. And the reason is for people to be able to give feedback, to also adjust them, to use them in the way they are. And it's not only just building these large models that are behind black boxes that you can't really interact with. And there's a whole movement kind of that goes with that. So opening it up, public broadcasting, permissive licenses, please, let's have a chat about that. But anyway, I think there was a question around here.
Oh yes, my question was basically what are specific ethical considerations that should be taken into account when developing and deploying AI generative systems?
Oh, sure. I think one just quickly highlighted was that part of this alignment thing. Who are you aligning it to becomes an issue. And there's also use cases of I think as Guy said, like people will be using these for different things and they're also monitoring you. What happens when you're using some of these systems that are closed where they're actually tracking you becomes a question. One of the big challenges that we had in the middle of the year is the whole thing of just imagine, especially in a lot of our people's work in this room, you're sitting there, you're looking with confidential information and you're trying to access things and you put information inside. What stops that company from saying, I quickly identify if somebody is putting in information that's novel, that is connected to a state that pays us to monitor for this input, and then report to them what it is that somebody is doing, right? So there's a lot of these things that come in, and that's why you have to have laws in some ways and policy that says that this is very clear that it's happening, that you must declare that these types of things are. At the moment, we don't. You just, you log in, you put in things, they say we don't track you, but you don't really know, right, if that's the truth. I think that was a question. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks a lot, Vukosi and Athandiwe for your presentation. I'm interested in asking you, Vukosi, will the pace of change of AI outstrip our ability to adapt as a people? And so I'm asking whether will AI be conscious of itself at some point with all this ChatGPT 4 and maybe 4.5? What will happen to ChatGPT 7? And just to reiterate, Guy, I am really worried. In your slides, I didn't get enough reassurance that we are having indigenous, sharing indigenous knowledge in terms of avoiding or resisting data imperialism. We have Google and Elon Musk being the one who are dominating the space, and the data dumping that we are getting from them as well. So I just thought maybe you should really reassure us about whether whether we have a future as having our own indigenous African data that is reflective of not repeating what has been happening with colonialism. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, this is a bit of I think, self-promotion. So I am giving a TEDx talk on the 4th of December on that angle. It's just that for this, you always have to choose what the angle of the talk is going to be, so we went through that. But yeah, please support at the end of that TED talk, just to bury the, not to bury the lead, just to say it out there, it says support the doers. Support the doers. There's many organizations on the African continent who are working to make sure we count when it comes to this. Sure, the war that's raging on, it's very funny. There's a whole war that's raging on. in some rooms currently at the moment. I know I'm going to go back onto X in a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to start seeing, again, the changes that are happening between Microsoft and OpenAI and likely are going to reverberate on there. And it's just a weird thing. Why did we give power to one company? Right, to literally make to make this decision about the future collectively, about where AI is going. And it's a very odd thing. And this is one of the things where, for example, at the Deep Learning Indaba, when we started it in 2017, and it actually started in I think the auditorium next door, the first meeting on strengthening African AI, was on this, that this is coming. This was back in 2016, we were telling you, like, this is coming, and we don't believe that on the African continent, there's no government and private sector who actually understand the magnitude that this is going to have on Africans, and we need to change the way that we do things. And now it's here, and it's almost like the cake has already been sliced and cut. We're just trying to go in and say, please recognize that we're also people. Right, and this is the part that now we're going through. So support the organizations that are doing that, find ways to collaborate, and then build on these things. Because if we don't, we're not going to have any agency. All it is just going to be that screen that has a prompt at the bottom. And that's the only thing you are allowed to do, is just put stuff in, ask, they harvest your information anyway, and never give anything back to you. So yeah, yeah, okay.
So thank you very much, Sia. Lots of very important questions, lots of important discussion that has to take place around this. So please engage with them and at other AI sessions, because these issues are absolutely important and critical. One announcement before we move on. I sent a notice last night prematurely about a gaming thing that we're doing. We're doing it this evening. So Africa Uncensored have been gaming some of their stories to reach different audiences, and they've set up a quick ice-breaking game that we'll do this evening. Please download the app. I put it in last night with a link.
Connect all the data on your phone.
Thank you, Guy. Okay, well, if you want to participate, please download the app. Yeah. And we'll see you this evening. Thank you.